It's almost midnight. You're lying in bed with your phone still in your hand, refreshing the same apps over and over again, hoping something will distract you from the silence in the room. Maybe a message, maybe a notification, maybe proof that someone, somewhere, is thinking about you. But nothing comes. And for a moment, the loneliness feels heavier than usual. Not because nobody exists around you, but because deep down, you're exhausted from always needing connection just to feel okay. That is the part most people never admit. Many people would rather stay in draining relationships, force dead conversations, or constantly surround themselves with noise than spend one honest night alone with their own thoughts. Because silence has a way of exposing everything distraction was hiding. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. Being alone is not the tragedy. Losing yourself because you're afraid to be alone is. And perhaps this season of solitude is not life abandoning you. Perhaps it is life stripping away distractions so you can finally become someone calm, emotionally free, and impossible to control. 1. Most people are not addicted to their phones. They're addicted to escaping themselves. A few weeks from now, you'll probably have another one of those nights. You'll get home exhausted, throw your wallet or keys onto the counter, and tell yourself you're just going to relax for a few minutes before bed. So you sit down on the couch, open your phone, and start scrolling without even thinking about it. One video turns into 10. 10 minutes turns into an hour. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, there's a brief moment where you stop scrolling for a second and just stare at the screen blankly. Not because you're interested anymore, but because something inside you suddenly feels off, quiet, heavy. So you keep scrolling again, and honestly, that moment says more about modern life than most people realize. Because people today are not constantly distracted because they're happy. They're distracted because silence has become uncomfortable. The average person wakes up and immediately reaches for stimulation before even speaking to themselves. Music while driving, podcasts while cooking, YouTube while eating, notifications every few minutes, constant noise filling every empty space of the day. And at first, it feels harmless. But slowly, something dangerous starts happening. You lose the ability to simply sit with yourself. Not productivity, not entertainment, yourself. That's why so many people feel strangely anxious the second life becomes quiet. A canceled plan, a slow weekend, a late night with no messages, a drive home with no music playing. Suddenly, thoughts begin surfacing that distractions were keeping buried. You start thinking about how long it's been since you genuinely felt peaceful, about relationships that drain you but still somehow control your emotions, about the fact that you can spend an entire day talking to people and still feel deeply alone afterward. And maybe the hardest realization of all is recognizing that some people are not afraid of loneliness. They're afraid of meeting themselves without distractions. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a person should be able to retreat within themselves at any moment. But if we're being honest, most people today have built lives specifically designed to avoid doing that. Because silence exposes things. It exposes insecurity, it exposes unresolved pain, it exposes how much of your confidence depends on attention from other people. And once you begin seeing that clearly, certain things become uncomfortable almost immediately. You notice how often people reach for their phones the moment conversations slow down. You notice how difficult it is for someone to sit in a room without checking notifications every few minutes. You notice how many relationships survive only because both people are terrified of being alone. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the twist nobody warns you about. The distractions were never the real problem. The real problem was what they were protecting you from, because the moment silence appears, your mind starts revealing everything you've been avoiding. Regret, comparison, emotional dependence, the need to constantly feel chosen. And this is where Stoicism becomes powerful in a way most people misunderstand. Stoicism is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about becoming strong enough to face yourself honestly without needing to escape every uncomfortable feeling. That kind of strength is rare now. A person who can sit alone at night without panicking, without needing validation, without desperately searching for distraction, has a kind of freedom many people never experience. Because emotionally dependent people are easy to manipulate. Their mood changes with attention. Their self-worth changes with responses. Their peace disappears the moment the outside world becomes quiet. But a person who becomes comfortable alone starts changing in subtle ways. They stop overreacting to silence. They stop chasing people who clearly pull away. They stop needing constant reassurance just to feel valuable. And maybe the biggest shift happens here. Solitude stops feeling like rejection and starts feeling like clarity. You begin hearing your own thoughts more clearly. You notice what truly matters to you. You become less reactive, less desperate, less emotionally chaotic. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you stopped running from yourself long enough to finally understand yourself. And that changes a person deeply, because the strongest people are usually not the loudest ones. They are the people who learned how to sit alone with their thoughts, without needing the world to constantly distract them from who they are. 2. The more you need attention, the more power you give away. You probably didn't notice when it started happening. At first, it seemed small. You send someone a message, and without thinking about it too much, you check your phone a few minutes later. Then again a little while after that. Then one more time before bed. Still nothing. And suddenly, your mood shifts in a way that feels strangely embarrassing to admit. Not because something terrible happened, but because silence from another person somehow feels personal. So your mind starts filling in the blanks. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe you matter less than you thought. And the dangerous part is that none of this usually happens out loud. It happens quietly, inside your own head. That's how emotional dependence works. Not dramatically, subtly. One unanswered message, one delayed response, one person slowly pulling away. And before long, your emotional state begins depending on things completely outside your control. Stoicism warned people about this long before phones existed. Epictetus taught that when your peace depends on external things, you place your freedom in fragile hands. And today, those external things often look ordinary enough that people never question them. Attention, validation, being wanted, being chosen. The modern world has normalized emotional dependency so deeply that many people confuse it with love. But they are not the same thing. Love does not make you abandon yourself. Dependency does. You can see it everywhere once you notice it. People forcing conversations that died weeks ago. Double texting someone who clearly stopped caring. Pretending not to feel disrespected because losing the connection feels scarier than losing self-respect. And maybe you've experienced this too. Maybe you've sat there rereading old messages, trying to figure out exactly when someone's energy changed. Maybe you've felt your chest tighten after seeing someone active online while ignoring your message. Maybe you've acted calmer than you really felt just to avoid looking emotionally affected. Because deep down, most people are terrified of one thing, feeling replaceable. And that fear controls more behavior than people realize. It keeps people chasing attention from those who already emotionally checked out. It keeps them available for people who only give temporary affection. It keeps them over-explaining, over-giving, over-performing, hoping that if they become good enough, they won't be abandoned. But here's the twist nobody wants to hear. The more desperately you need someone to choose you, the less power you have in your own life. Because emotional desperation changes the way you move through the world. People can feel it, not always consciously, but they feel it. They feel when your self-worth depends on their attention. They feel when your mood changes based on their response time. They feel when you're afraid to lose them. And the painful truth is that emotionally dependent people often tolerate things emotionally healthy people would walk away from immediately. Disrespect, mixed signals, inconsistency, lack of effort. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because the fear of being alone feels heavier than the pain of being undervalued. That realization changes you once you truly see it, because suddenly you begin understanding why so many people stay trapped in cycles that quietly destroy their peace. They are not addicted to the person. They are addicted to the temporary relief that attention gives them, and relief is not the same thing as connection. Stoicism teaches something difficult but freeing. Your value cannot depend on whether someone texts back, stays interested, or chooses you consistently. Because the moment your self-worth becomes dependent on another human being's attention, your emotional stability becomes unstable by definition. And unstable people are easy to control. That's why solitude matters so much. Not because isolation is the goal, but because learning how to emotionally stand on your own changes the way you love, connect, and move through relationships forever. A person who is comfortable alone does not panic when silence appears. They do not chase people for reassurance every few hours. They do not force themselves into spaces where they are barely appreciated. And ironically, those are usually the people others respect the most, because calm detachment carries a different energy. Not coldness, not arrogance, just quiet self-respect. The kind that says, I appreciate connection, but I will not abandon myself just to keep it. That energy is rare now, and maybe that's why so many people mistake emotional independence for being distant. Because they've spent their entire lives surrounded by people who needed constant validation to feel valuable. But the strongest people are often the ones who no longer need to beg for attention to feel worthy. They learned how to sit with themselves first, and once a person learns that, the world loses one of its easiest ways to control them. 3. Solitude is where you finally hear the truth about yourself. One night after an argument, you decide not to reply right away. Your phone is sitting next to you. The message is still open. You've already typed 3 different responses in your head. Part of you wants to defend yourself. Another part wants to say something colder, something that proves you don't care. But instead, you put the phone face down and sit there in silence. And at first, it feels almost unbearable. Your chest feels tight. Your thoughts keep replaying the conversation. You imagine what they might be thinking right now. You feel the urge to check your phone every few minutes just to see if they responded again. Most people call this emotional pain, but often it's something deeper. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from emotional stimulation. Withdrawal from validation. Withdrawal from the constant need to feel emotionally connected to something outside yourself. And this is where solitude becomes uncomfortable in a completely different way. Because when you stop reacting immediately, you start seeing yourself clearly. You notice how badly you want the last word, how quickly silence makes you anxious, how often your emotions try to convince you that reacting impulsively will somehow bring relief. But relief and peace are not the same thing. That's one of the hardest lessons Stoicism teaches. Most reactions feel powerful in the moment. Sending the angry text, explaining yourself repeatedly, trying to make someone understand your pain immediately. But afterward, many people don't actually feel stronger. They feel exposed, because emotional impulsiveness almost always gives other people access to parts of you they did not earn. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that the mind gains strength when it learns not to be dragged around by emotion like a puppet on strings. And honestly, modern life makes that harder than ever. Everything now is designed to provoke immediate reaction. Notifications, arguments online, instant replies, constant opinions, constant emotional stimulation. People are losing the ability to pause. And the scary part is that most people mistake emotional reaction for honesty. They think, if I feel it, I should immediately express it. But Stoicism teaches that emotions are real without always being reliable. That changes everything. Because the moment you realize you do not have to obey every emotion the second it appears, you begin becoming dangerous in a very quiet way. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to chaos. Think about how much suffering in life comes from temporary emotions controlling permanent decisions. One moment of anger destroys a relationship. One lonely night leads someone back to people they already knew were unhealthy. One emotional impulse creates consequences that last for years. And yet most people never stop to ask themselves a simple question: who would I become if I stopped reacting to every emotion immediately? That question alone can change a life, because solitude gives you something distraction never can: observation. When you spend time alone without constantly escaping your thoughts, patterns begin revealing themselves. You notice how rejection affects your confidence, how boredom immediately pushes you towards stimulation, how loneliness sometimes makes you romanticize people who were never actually good for you. And that realization can feel brutal at first, because once you become aware of your emotional patterns, you can no longer pretend they control you unconsciously. Now you see them happening in real time. You catch yourself reaching for the phone. You catch yourself wanting reassurance. You catch yourself imagining worst-case scenarios that haven't even happened. And strangely enough, that awareness creates space. A pause, a small moment between emotion and reaction. That moment is where self-control begins. Not perfection, not numbness, self-control. The Stoics understood that inner peace is not built by controlling the world around you. It is built by controlling your response to the world within you. And that takes practice, a lot of practice, because emotional discipline is not built during motivational moments. It's built during ordinary moments nobody sees. The late-night silence after disappointment. The decision not to send another message. The moment you choose to breathe instead of react. The moment you realize your emotions are asking for attention, not automatic obedience. That's the hidden power of solitude. It forces you to confront yourself honestly, not the version you perform for other people. The real version, the insecure version, the reactive version, the emotionally dependent version. And at first, that confrontation hurts. But eventually, something changes. You stop fearing your emotions so much, because you realize they rise and fall like waves. They are temporary. They do not define you unless you surrender control to them. And slowly, you become calmer. Not because life stopped being difficult, but because your emotions stopped controlling every direction of your life. That kind of calm is rare now. Most people are controlled by whatever they felt 5 minutes ago. But the people who learn how to sit alone with uncomfortable emotions without immediately escaping them develop a kind of inner stability that the outside world struggles to shake. 4. Some people only value you when they feel you pulling away. At some point, you probably noticed something that made you uncomfortable. Someone who ignored your messages for days suddenly became interested the moment you stopped reaching out. Someone who barely gave you attention suddenly noticed your absence when you became quieter. And for a second, it almost confused you, because part of you wanted to believe, maybe they finally realized my value. But deep down, another part of you sensed something darker. Some people do not respond to your presence. They respond to losing access to you. That realization changes the way you see relationships forever, because many people are not emotionally attached to others in the way they think they are. They become attached to familiarity, attention, convenience, emotional access, the comfort of knowing someone will always be there no matter how little effort they give in return. And once you see that clearly, a lot of modern relationships start feeling different. You notice how some people only text when they feel lonely, how some people disappear when life is good, but suddenly return when they need emotional support. How certain friendships survive almost entirely on your effort while the other person slowly stops investing. And maybe the hardest part is realizing how long you tolerated it. Not because you were weak, but because you kept confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. Stoicism teaches something most people resist hearing. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your energy. That does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean hating people. It simply means recognizing that constantly draining yourself to keep others comfortable is not love. It is self-abandonment. And a lot of people live that way without even noticing. You see it in small moments. Replying immediately to people who consistently make you wait. Always being the one to check in first. Over-explaining your feelings to people committed to misunderstanding you. Giving endless patience to those who would replace you without hesitation. At first, these things seem normal, but over time, they slowly destroy something important, your self-respect. Because every time you ignore your own emotional exhaustion just to maintain a connection, you teach yourself that keeping people matters more than protecting your peace. That's why solitude becomes so important. Not because being alone is always easy, but because distance reveals things attachment hides. A person can look valuable when you are emotionally attached to them. But once you step back and observe clearly, you sometimes realize the relationship was surviving almost entirely on your emotional effort. And that realization hurts, especially when you genuinely cared, especially when you stayed patient longer than you should have, especially when you kept hoping people would eventually give the same energy you gave naturally. But here's the painful truth many people spend years avoiding. Some people never truly valued you. They valued your availability, your attention, your consistency, your willingness to stay. And once your presence no longer becomes guaranteed, their behavior changes almost immediately. That's why so many people become suddenly attentive the moment you emotionally detach. Not because they deeply transformed overnight, but because access to you no longer feels permanent. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that you should never place your peace in the hands of people whose character changes with convenience. And honestly, that lesson becomes more important the older you get. Because eventually, life forces you to choose between two painful things: loneliness or relationships that quietly destroy your spirit. Most people choose the second one because it feels less obvious, at least temporarily. But emotional exhaustion accumulates slowly. You start overthinking more, feeling emotionally drained after conversations, feeling strangely anxious around people who claim to care about you, and eventually, your body starts recognizing what your mind keeps trying to rationalize. Peace should not feel this difficult. That realization becomes a turning point, because mature solitude feels very different from emotional isolation. Isolation says, "No one cares about me." But mature solitude says, "I would rather protect my peace than force connections that cost me my self-respect." That is not weakness. That is emotional intelligence. And ironically, the moment you stop desperately trying to keep everyone in your life, you begin seeing people more clearly than ever before, who reaches out only when they need something, who respects your boundaries, who disappears the moment access becomes limited, who genuinely values you without needing constant emotional labor from you. Silence reveals all of it. That's why solitude can feel so transformative, not because it removes people from your life, but because it removes illusion. And once illusion disappears, something powerful happens. You stop begging for reciprocity. You stop chasing clarity from inconsistent people. You stop explaining your worth to those determined not to see it. And slowly, your energy changes. Calmer, more selective, harder to emotionally manipulate. Because the people who truly become strong are not the ones who learn how to control others. They are the ones who finally learn when to quietly let go. 5. The moment you become comfortable. Alone, you become dangerous. There comes a moment, quietly, almost without warning, where something inside you begins changing, not dramatically. You do not wake up one morning suddenly fearless or emotionally untouchable. It happens in smaller ways than that. One day, you notice you no longer feel the urge to check who viewed your story. You stop rereading old conversations before going to sleep. You stop feeling anxious every time someone takes longer to reply. And strangely, the silence that once felt heavy starts feeling peaceful. At first, you barely notice it, but over time, you realize something important. You are no longer reacting to life the way you used to. A few years ago, someone pulling away would have consumed your mind for days. Now, you notice it, accept it, and continue moving forward. Not because you stopped caring, but because your entire emotional foundation changed. That's the hidden transformation solitude creates. It slowly removes the illusion that your peace depends on other people constantly choosing you. And once that illusion disappears, your mind becomes lighter in ways that are hard to explain. You stop overthinking every interaction. You stop trying to decode mixed signals from emotionally inconsistent people. You stop shrinking yourself just to maintain connections that drain you. And maybe the strangest part is this: the less desperate you become for attention, the more calm and confident your presence feels. Because desperation has an energy. People can feel when someone is terrified of losing approval. They can feel when someone constantly needs reassurance. They can feel when someone's self-worth depends on external validation. But they can also feel the opposite. They can feel when someone is emotionally grounded, when someone enjoys connection but does not depend on it for identity, when someone values themselves enough to walk away from anything that destroys their peace. That energy changes the way the world responds to you, not because you became manipulative, but because emotional independence naturally creates quiet strength. Think about it. The people who are easiest to manipulate are usually the ones most afraid of being alone. That fear controls their decisions. It keeps them in relationships they already know are unhealthy. It makes them tolerate disrespect they would never accept from themselves. It convinces them to chase people who stopped valuing them a long time ago. Because when someone fears loneliness deeply enough, they will trade almost anything to avoid it, even their dignity. Stoicism tries to free you from that trap, not by teaching you to avoid people, but by teaching you how to remain whole even when people leave. That is a completely different kind of power, and honestly, most people never develop it, because developing it requires something modern life constantly avoids: stillness, reflection, solitude. You begin noticing this transformation during ordinary moments. Sitting alone at a coffee shop without needing your phone every 30 seconds. Driving at night with no music playing and actually enjoying the quiet. Spending a weekend by yourself without feeling emotionally abandoned by the world. Those moments seem small, but psychologically, they are massive. Because for the first time in a long time, your nervous system stops depending on constant stimulation to feel safe. And once that happens, your emotional reactions start slowing down. You stop panicking when things become uncertain. You stop chasing closure from people incapable of giving it. You stop forcing emotional access to people who already emotionally withdrew. Not because you became cold, because you became stable. That's the difference. A lot of people confuse emotional stability with emotional detachment, but they are not the same thing. Detached people stop feeling. Stable people simply stop collapsing. And the older you get, the more valuable that becomes. Because life will always be unpredictable. People will change. Relationships will end. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you communicate. And if your peace depends entirely on external stability, your inner world will constantly feel fragile. The Stoics understood this deeply. That's why they focused so heavily on inner control instead of external attachment. Because eventually, every person faces moments where they have no control over what others choose to do, but they still control how they carry themselves through it. That is where dignity lives. And maybe that's the final twist most people never expect. Solitude was never the thing destroying you. It was exposing the parts of you that believed you could not survive without constant connection. But you can. You always could. And once you truly realize that, something inside you settles. You stop needing to prove your worth constantly. You stop chasing people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop fearing silence. Because silence no longer feels empty. It feels like freedom. And the people who reach that point become very difficult to break. Not because life stops hurting them, but because they no longer abandon themselves every time life becomes painful. If this video taught you anything, let it be this. Being alone is not what weakens most people. What weakens them is constantly abandoning themselves just to avoid loneliness. Throughout this video, we talked about distraction, emotional dependence, validation, silence, relationships, and the quiet strength that comes from learning how to stand on your own without collapsing. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you've started seeing your solitude differently. Not as a punishment, but as a space where clarity can finally grow. So over the next few days, try something simple. Spend a little time alone without immediately reaching for distraction. Sit with your thoughts. Go for a drive without music. Put the phone down for a while. Learn how to be present with yourself again. Because the more comfortable you become with your own mind, the less control the outside world has over your peace. Stoicism was never about becoming cold or emotionless. It was about becoming steady in a world that constantly tries to pull you away from yourself. Thank you for spending this time here with me tonight. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who may need it right now. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.